The hall smells of wax and steel and too many perfumes trying to hide the bite of fear. Omegas stand in a gleaming row, jeweled and painted like offerings laid out for a god who might be merciful if impressed. I shouldn't be here. My hands still remember the rough bark of the trees behind my cottage, the weight of bandages and herbs, not silk, but my council signed my name at the bottom of a treaty they barely understood, trading one fertile omega of Holofen for walls and warriors. I keep my gray hood up, fingers tight around the simple cord at my throat, where a tiny carved wolf tooth rests against my skin. The only thing my mother left me. When the doors open and he enters, every muscle in the hall tenses. Jonathan is all iron and leather and shadow, dark braids falling over broad shoulders, sword at his hip like it belongs there more than he does anywhere else. He should look at the jeweled girls. Instead, his gaze cuts through the line and catches on the plain girl in the cloak. On me. That one, he says. The Omega in gray. Bring her to my chambers. My freedom just became a bet I have one night to win. The king's guards did not touch me more than they had to, but their silence felt like a hand around my throat. Boots beat a slow drum against the stone as we climbed deeper into the fortress, away from the echoing roar of the great hall. Torches spit and hissed along the walls, throwing orange light over carved wolves and battle scenes that followed us like watching eyes. My own steps were almost soundless, the hem of my cream gown whispering over the floor, my cloak brushing my ankles. I kept one hand fisted in the wool at my throat, thumb pressed hard against the little wolf tooth beneath, as if I could grind my fear into it instead of letting it pulse through my veins. No one spoke. The lead guard marched with the unbothered ease of someone who did this often, who had brought other Omegas down the same path. I wondered if any of them had returned this way, or if all their roads ended at the door ahead. We turned a final corner, and the corridor widened. The door at the far end was not just a door but a statement, dark wood banded with iron, flanked by stone wolves whose eyes seemed to glint in the torchlight. My heart lurched, then thudded heavy against my ribs, like it was trying to beat its way back toward Holofen and the safe, familiar weight of my herb baskets. Stop, the guard said. I had already stopped. He knocked once, the sound solid and final. A moment later, a deep voice answered from inside. Send her in. Alone. Of course. Isolation first. Break the Omega away from the pack, then from herself. That was what the whispered stories said. The guard's hand landed briefly on my shoulder, a touch that should have been steadying, but his fingers trembled just enough for me to notice. Do as he says, he murmured, and remember the treaty, as if I could forget, as if the signatures and seals and my council's fearful eyes weren't all I'd been seeing since they shoved me into the wagon. He opened the door and stepped aside. No one tried to push me forward. Perhaps they knew I would go. A true coward would have tried to bolt long before the private wing. I had walked every step, one after another, because there was nowhere to run that did not leave Holofen exposed. I drew one breath, then another. Then I walked through. The chamber was bigger than the entire lower floor of my cottage. My first impression was of warmth. A fire thundered in a massive hearth, heat rolling through the room and carrying the scents of pine resin, leather, and something darker male, wild, and unmistakably him. Jonathan stood with his back to me, facing the fire. He had stripped off the heavier plates of his armor. Black leather hugged his shoulders and chest, buckles catching the light. His dark hair was loose from the war braid he'd worn in the hall, falling in thick ropes down his back. Even without the crown, power sat on him like another layer of armor. The door clicked shut behind me. I heard the guard's retreating footsteps. Then there was nothing but the crackle of flames and the slow, measured rhythm of his breathing. He did not whirl dramatically or stalk toward me. He finished the task he had been doing, setting a poker back into its stand before turning. The stories had not mentioned his eyes. They were not simply dark, they were layered. Shadow ringed a warmer brown, flecked with gold that the firelight woke. For a heartbeat, those eyes drifted over me the way a hunter might take in terrain cloak, gown, bare hands, the tense set of my shoulders. Then they returned to my face and stayed there. Olive of Holofen, he said. My name sounded strange on his tongue, more solid than it had ever felt in my own mouth. I forced my chin up. Your Majesty. He watched me for a long moment, long enough that every mistake I had ever made unfurled in my mind like a list. When he finally moved, it was not toward me, but toward the side wall, where a small table waited with a decanter and 2 cups. Wine? He asked. Not kneel, not strip, wine. I'd rather keep a clear head, I said, surprised my voice did not crack. One corner of his mouth twitched, not quite becoming a smile. You think I'd have to drug you to get you into my bed? I think you don't know me, I replied, and that earned me a spark in his eyes that might have been amusement, or interest, or both. Fair enough, he said. He poured only one cup and took it for himself, leaning against the table instead of occupying the looming chair near the fire that had clearly been designed for a king to look down on everyone. Come closer, Olive, he said. I don't like shouting across rooms. Every instinct told me to stay where I was, but I made myself walk forward. My steps felt too loud now, my skin too tight. When I reached what I judged, a safe distance close enough to see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, but not close enough for him to reach out without warning, I stopped. Is this close enough? I asked. For now. His gaze searched my face, then dropped briefly to where my hand still held my cloak closed. You're shaking. No, I'm not. I was. My whole body buzzed, like before a storm when the air itself holds its breath. Fear? He asked. Anger, I said quickly. Then, because it was pointless to lie to a predator who could smell it on me, I added, some fear. He took a slow sip of wine, never looking away. Good. Fear keeps people from making foolish choices. He set the cup aside. Let's take care of the bargain before either of us starts imagining we have more than we do. The word bargain cut through the room like a clean blade. He pushed away from the table and stepped toward me. I held my ground, every muscle screaming, but I refused to step back. If I was going to be prey, I would at least face the teeth. To my surprise, he stopped at arm's length, hands visible at his sides. In the hall, he said. I gave your council's messenger my terms. I will give them again to you, and only once, so there can be no mistake. I swallowed. I'm listening. One night, he said. From now until dawn. In my bed. You will not be chained. I will not beat you. I will not put my mark in your neck. When the first light touches the highest window, if you are still here, still breathing, you walk out with a sealed decree that names Holofin under my permanent protection. No more tributes, no more raids. His voice didn't rise, didn't soften. It was flat, practical, like reciting an inventory. And if I refuse? I asked. He did not look away. The treaty burns, the protection ends, my borders are contested. There are alphas who would welcome an undefended village on the edge of my lands. My stomach turned, thinking of the children who came to my cottage with scraped knees and fevers, the old woman whose hands shook as she offered me eggs in exchange for salve. Faces lined up in my mind, one after another. And if I run? I pressed. A muscle in his jaw ticked. I will not chase you, he said. But the decree will never be written. What other alphas do to an unclaimed, unprotected Omega outside my walls is their choice. Not mine. The room seemed to tilt. There it was. The cage behind one door, open sky and teeth behind the other. Some choice. My fingers dug into the fabric at my throat so hard my knuckles ached. You make it sound almost generous. His gaze dropped briefly to my hand, then rose again. I make it sound honest. There are kings who would simply take what they want and send the scraps home. I prefer contracts to chains. Contracts can be chains, I said, only if you sign the wrong ones. His eyes held mine. This one you sign with time. With endurance. Not blood. Not blood. No mark. My neck throbbed anyway, as if my skin could feel the ghost of teeth that had not touched it. I drew a breath that felt like swallowing broken glass. And if I fail? If I can endure until dawn? The words stuck in my throat. I forced them out. Do you still protect Holofin? His silence stretched, heavy as a cloak. No, he said finally, and there was no satisfaction in it, just unbending truth. My word is not a river I can redirect when it becomes inconvenient. If you don't keep your part, I cannot keep mine, without teaching my enemies that my promises are soft. I hated that this made sense. I hated even more that part of me respected it. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I thought of my cottage, of the herb-drying racks and the little window that looked over the stream. I thought of going back there knowing I had chosen myself and no one else, and of never seeing that cottage again because the next raid burned it to the ground. The choice narrowed itself into a single, blinding line. I endure, I said, and my voice sounded distant to my own ears. Until dawn. Whatever you ask, that does not break the terms you just gave me. I will survive. His eyes darkened, not with triumph, but with something heavier. Responsibility, maybe. Think carefully, Olive, he said. This is the moment you cannot take back. I already couldn't take it back, I whispered. They sent me the moment they sealed that treaty. This is the first thing that is mine to choose. He studied me, like a man examining a blade for hidden cracks. Then he nodded. Once. Very well, he said quietly. We have a bargain. He extended his hand between us, palm open. It took a heartbeat, then another, for my body to move. When my fingers finally slid into his, heat seared up my arm, startling in its intensity. His hand closed around mine, firm but not crushing, the calluses on his palm rough against my skin. For an instant, the room, the fire, the stone, all of it faded beneath the sharp, visceral awareness of that contact. Something inside me shivered, deep and inexplicable. Welcome to my mercy, Olive of Holofen, he murmured. I tightened my grip so he wouldn't see my hand shake. Welcome to my terms, Your Majesty. His mouth curved, slow and dangerous, as if I had just thrown down a gauntlet at his feet. Dawn felt very far away. Steam wrapped around me like a second cloak, thicker and warmer than the gray wool I'd worn from Holofen. The bathing chamber was carved straight into the stone, its ceiling low and curved, candles tucked into niches so their flames trembled in little pools of gold. Someone had scattered herbs into the water, rosemary, mint, a hint of lavender until the air smelled like my work table at home and the ache in my chest sharpened. Jonathan had stood in the doorway just long enough to tell me, "Take your time. No one comes in unless you call." And then he'd left, the door closing with a soft finality that unsettled me more than if he'd stayed. Kings didn't give Omega's privacy in the stories. I undressed with hands that still shook from our bargain, folding my old gown and cloak on a narrow bench, as if that care could keep them from disappearing. The water was almost too hot at first. But once I sank in, my muscles loosened in slow stages, like knots untying under invisible fingers. Dirt from the journey clouded the surface. I watched Holofen's road wash away in murky ribbons. I scrubbed harder than I needed to, dragging the linen cloth over my skin until it flushed pink. It felt wrong to be clean here, in a place that wasn't mine, preparing myself for a night I hadn't chosen. Yet another part of me, small, treacherous, sighed at the feel of real soap and heated water, luxuries my village only dreamed of when winter bit too deep. When I reached for the last pin in my hair, it snagged. I tugged. The tangle held. "Of course," I muttered, fingers slipping in the damp coils. The wolf tooth at my throat bumped my knuckles, a familiar reassurance. You could fight off a fever in a child with no more than willow bark and hope, Olive, but gods forbid you manage a knot. I finally freed it, working the long, wet length of my hair loose down my back. Blonde strands clung to my shoulders like riverweed. For a moment I just sat, chin on my knees, letting the heat seep into my bones, trying not to think about the man waiting outside this chamber. The bargain sat in my mind like a stone. One night, one dawn, my body for their safety. I had made peace with that. It was everything else that frightened me. When the water cooled and goose flesh rose along my arms, I forced myself out. A thick towel waited on a peg, softer than anything I'd ever owned. I wrapped it around myself, then reached for the gown folded on the bench. It was simple by court standards, soft cream fabric, long sleeves, a square neckline, but the seams were smooth, the stitching fine. A thin belt of braided cord cinched it at my waist. No jewels, no branding, nothing that screamed possession. He could have dressed me like a trophy. He hadn't. My feet were bare when I opened the door and stepped back into the main chamber. The first thing I saw was the fire. Bigger now, fed while I was away, flames licking high and throwing restless light across the walls. The second was Jonathan. The armor was gone. He wore only a dark linen shirt, laces loose at his throat, sleeves pushed to his elbows. Without all that metal, he seemed no less dangerous, only different. Less like a statue carved from iron, and more like a man built from flesh and heat. The candlelight and fire picked out the map of scars across his forearms and the side of his neck, pale lines and jagged ridges that told stories without words. He sat in a heavy chair near the hearth, one ankle hooked over his knee, a decanter and 2 cups on the low table beside him. He looked up when I entered, eyes tracking the damp ends of my hair, the way the gown clung to me while still doing its best to be modest. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. The room felt smaller than it had before. "You took less time than most," he said at last, voice low but not unkind. "Sit." There was another chair opposite his, carved and cushioned. It unnerved me that we would be at nearly the same height if I took it. No kneeling pillow. No collar at its side. You don't want me on the floor? I asked, before I could swallow the words back. Something flickered in his expression. Do you? I spend enough time on the floor tending other people's wounds, I said. I'd rather not add yours to the list. His mouth quirked, brief as lightning. Then sit in the chair, Olive. I did, easing onto the edge, back straight. The fire warmed my bare feet, sending a shiver up my legs. Up close, the scars were even clearer. One slashed across the back of his hand, another disappeared under his sleeve. Not the thin, tidy marks of training mishaps. The kind you got when someone truly wanted you dead. He reached for the decanter. You refused wine earlier. My offer stands. I don't trust things given freely by kings, I said, but there was less bite in it than before. Nothing here is free. He poured into one cup, then paused, looking at me over the rim. Consider it payment for your answers. My fingers curled against my knees. What answers? About Holofen. He set one cup in front of me, within easy reach, and took the other for himself. About the work you do. About the people I just bought with your body. Bought. At least he didn't pretend otherwise. That honesty steadied me more than a gentler word might have. I wrapped my hand around the cup, letting the warmth seep into my fingers without yet lifting it. What do you want to know? Everything, he said simply. We'll start smaller. He leaned back, cradling his own cup, studying me as if I were a particularly complicated wound he wasn't sure how to close. You're a healer, he said. Not a question. Yes. Herbs, poultices, midwifery, all of it. Talking about my work eased the stiffness in my spine. Broken bones, infected cuts, winter cough, births, when the midwives are busy or afraid. I mend what I can, comfort what I can't. And who taught you? He asked. Your mother? My mother died when I was 8. The familiar bruise of that memory barely twinged anymore. Village healer took me on, partly from pity, mostly because she needed hands that could carry water. She taught me what she knew. The rest I learned from watching, and from mistakes I don't intend to repeat. How many people live in Holofen? Too few when the raiders are hungry, I said. Too many when winter stores run thin. A corner of his mouth lifted again at that, not quite humor, more recognition. You speak like someone who's counted every mouth. I have, I said quietly. Someone had to. He drank, gaze never leaving my face. So when you agreed to my terms, you weren't just thinking of yourself. No, I said. I was thinking of every child whose ribs I can count through their shirts, every elder whose lungs rattle when the frost comes. They didn't sign the treaty, but they'll bleed for it if I fail. Silence settled between us for a moment, full but not empty. The fire popped, sending a swirl of sparks up the chimney. You hate this bargain, he said. Yes, but you don't hate me. I startled. You sound very sure of that. If you hated me, you would have spat in my face in the hall and forced my hand, he said calmly. You'd have made me the monster your council believes I am. You didn't. You walked. Walking and liking are not the same thing, I said. No. His gaze drifted to the scars on his own forearm, thumb rubbing absently along one curved white line. But I have seen hatred. It smells like iron and storm. You smell like fear and rosemary and stubbornness. Heat climbed my neck. You can smell stubbornness? On you, yes. His eyes cut back to mine, dark and focused. Now drink. You'll need your throat for talking. Against my better judgment, I raised the cup. The wine was rich and dry, heavier than the thin, sour stuff we sometimes coaxed from Holofen's grapes. It slid warm into my stomach, taking the edge off the chill still trapped in my bones. You said I'd need my throat, I reminded him. What about yours? I've bared mine enough tonight, he said. Your turn. I should have let the comment pass. Instead, curiosity pricked at me. When exactly do you think you bared yours, Your Majesty? I don't recall you confessing any sins. His jaw tightened, then eased. He set his cup down, fingers lingering on the rim. When he spoke again, his voice had roughened, just a little. You asked who would suffer if you ran, he said. I told you. That's more honesty than most kings offer before they take what they want. That's just strategy, I said. Keeping your word so your enemies can't use it against you. Strategy kept me alive long enough to wear this crown, he said, but it wasn't strategy the night I inherited it. The room cooled around us, as though a draft had slipped under the door. I watched his profile as he stared into the hearth, the fire painting one side of his face in gold and leaving the other in shadow. How old were you? The question escaped before I could stop it. 17, he said. Almost 18. Old enough to swing a sword with purpose. Too young to recognize the smell of poison before it hit my father's blood. The wine turned to ash on my tongue. I didn't know, I said softly. Most don't. They prefer the story where the old king died peacefully, and the heir slid into place like a key in a lock. His fingers tapped once against the wood, a quiet, restless sound. The truth is messier. I could see it now, in the crease between his brows, in the tight set of his shoulders. What happened? Feast, he said. Celebration of a treaty my father should never have signed. He lifted his cup. He drank. By the time anyone realized why his lips were blackening, half the nobles at the high table were choking. A phantom taste of bitterness touched my tongue. I set my own cup down, suddenly very aware of the wine inside it. You survived, I said. Barely. His thumb traced that jagged scar along his neck. The assassin misjudged my weight. I took less poison than the others. Long enough for me to watch my mother fall beside my father. Long enough to see which of our guests stayed seated, waiting. Waited to see if they might claim the throne themselves. I'd seen that look once, when the old healer coughed blood into her hand, and 3 women in the village watched with calculation instead of grief. How did you? I trailed off, realizing there was no gentle way to finish. How did I keep my head? Jonathan supplied. I stood. I drew my father's sword off his body, and I asked who among them would like to test whether I'd die before I took a few of them with me. A thin smile touched his lips, humorless and sharp. No one liked the odds. You were poisoned, I said. You could have collapsed. I did, he said. Later. After the ones who arranged it were hanging from the walls, the image was brutal. It should have repulsed me. Instead, something like understanding rippled through my chest. This was a man who had watched his world drown in blood before he'd finished being a boy. You don't trust easy submission, I murmured, and the pieces slid closer together. Because you watched people smile and drink with your family while they were already sharpening the knives. His gaze snapped back to mine, sharp and assessing. You're quick. I had to be. I lifted my chin. In Holofen, if you trust the wrong smile, you end up dead in a ditch or sold downriver. I'm not the only one who's learned to survive. We looked at each other across the small space between our chairs, the fire painting us in the same restless light. For the first time since I'd entered this room, I didn't see only a king weighing his purchase. I saw a boy on a blood-slicked floor, gripping a sword that was almost too heavy for his hands, forcing himself to stand when every instinct begged him to fall. That made him far more dangerous than the distant, armored figure in the hall. Monsters were easy to resist. Men with histories that rhymed with my own were not. He seemed to read something of that realization in my face. His voice softened, the edge of command blunting. You're not a trinket I plucked from a table, Olive, he said. Your council thought they were giving me something expendable. They were wrong. I know exactly what I'm holding tonight. Do you? I asked, my throat tight. Yes, he said quietly. A woman who walked into a bargain with open eyes because she loved her people more than she feared me. I will not pretend that doesn't mean something. My heart lurched, traitorous thing that it was. I pressed my palms to my knees to steady them. You still expect me in your bed, I reminded him, needing the clarity of that line. His gaze dipped, just once, to the pulse fluttering in my throat, then rose again. Yes. Our bargain hasn't changed. Good. Terrible. I couldn't decide. But, he added, I expect you there as a woman who knows who I am. Not a shadow behind a crown. Behind armor there is flesh. Behind my title, there is a man who bleeds. And behind the Omega? I asked, surprised by my own boldness. What do you see there? His eyes held mine for a long, furious beat. Someone who hasn't decided yet if she's walking toward her own execution, he said softly, or toward the first choice that truly belongs to her. The fire cracked. The wine gleamed like dark blood between us. I realized, with a slow, chilling certainty, that somewhere between the steam of the bath and the scars on his skin, the king had become a man. And if I wasn't careful, that was going to be the most dangerous part of this night. The air between us thickens once the questions run out. We've drained most of the wine, but the warmth buzzing under my skin has very little to do with it. It's him the way he watches me like he's memorizing, not measuring. the way his gaze keeps drifting to my mouth, then away, as if he's denying himself something he could easily take. We don't sit as neatly as we did at first. At some point, our chairs angled closer, drawn like magnets on a table. My bare feet have edged nearer to his, toes almost brushing his boot. My knees tilt in his direction. It feels less like a conversation and more like orbit, each of us testing gravity. "Tell me," Jonathan says quietly, "does Holofen get much snow?" I blink, thrown by the softness of the question. "Some. Enough to make the children wild. Not enough to keep the traitors away." "Why?" He considers his cup for a moment, then sets it aside unfinished. "I'm trying to decide if you've ever seen the fortress in winter." "I've never seen your fortress at all," I remind him. "Until they handed me over at the gate, the closest I'd been was a rumor." His mouth curves. "Rumors can be kinder than reality." "Not often," I say. "Holofen's rumors about you weren't exactly flattering." "I imagine not." Amusement glints in his eyes. "And now that you've met me, am I worse or better than the monster they described?" "I should say worse. That would be safer." Instead, I hear myself answer, "Different." He leans forward, elbows on his knees, hands loosely linked. We're close enough now that when the fire pops, I see the flare reflected in his eyes. "Different how?" "You ask," I say. The monster in the stories never bothered. I only ask when the answers matter. His gaze drops briefly to my throat, to the pulse beating too fast there, then returns to my eyes. "Yours do." The words should feel like a tactic. They don't. They settle in my chest, dislodging something hard I've kept there for years. His hand lifts, then pauses halfway, fingers curling in on themselves. "May I?" he asks. "May you what?" My voice comes out softer than I intend. "Touch you." Heat crawls up my neck. He could have closed the distance already, taken my mouth, my wrists, anything he wanted. Instead, he waits, his hand suspended between us like an unanswered question. Every lesson I've taught myself whispers no. Every instinct burning under my skin wants to lean into that waiting palm. "One touch," I say, pretending it matters, that a line that thin can hold. For now. His lips tilt, not in mockery but in something like relief. "For now," he echoes. He reaches the rest of the way, fingers brushing my jaw, then settling along the side of my face. His palm is warm, calloused, surprisingly gentle. The roughness contrasts with the care of the contact, sending a shiver down my spine. He doesn't drag me closer. He just holds me there, giving me every chance to pull away. I don't. His thumb traces the edge of my cheekbone, slow and reverent, as if he's handling a relic instead of a girl the council marked as expendable. My eyes want to close, but I force them to stay open, locked on his. "There," he murmurs, more to himself than to me. "That's better." "What is?" My words are breath against his wrist, being this close without the hall watching, without the armor. His gaze flicks over my features, lingering as if he's checking each of them off against a memory. I wondered if I'd imagined it. "Imagined what?" I whisper. "Your scent," he says, and the word is a caress. "The night of the border skirmish. You were there, with a wounded boy by the stream." My breath seizes. Holofen's edge, smoke in the air, a young soldier gasping as I pressed cloth to his torn side. I remember the thunder of approaching riders, the flash of a dark horse, the metallic tang of blood and fear. "You didn't even look at me," I say slowly. "You shouted for your men to fall back, and then you were gone." "My eyes were on the archers," he says. "But my wolf," he breaks off, jaw working. When he speaks again, his voice is rougher. "My wolf was elsewhere, searching, trying to find the source of this." His thumb drifts along my jaw, down to the frantic flutter at my throat. "This ache. I caught your scent over blood and iron, and I couldn't shake it for weeks." "It could have been any Omega," I say, but my protest thins as I speak it. "It wasn't," he replies simply. "I know the difference between hunger and this." Something inside me loosens and tightens at the same time. I want to scoff, to accuse him of rehearsed lines, but there's no polish to the way he says it. It sounds almost like a confession wrung out against his will. To prove I'm not affected, I should pull away, laugh, call him dramatic. Instead, my fingers rise of their own accord and close around his wrist. His pulse jumps under my touch. "If I haunt you," I say, because I can't stop myself. "What does that make you, Jonathan? A nightmare?" "A habit," he says. One I'm not inclined to break. I should not like the way my name sounds in his mouth. I should not like the idea of haunting anyone, least of all a king. But the shiver that runs through me has nothing to do with fear. His hand is still on my face. With my fingers wrapped around his wrist, I realize I can guide him if I want. Closer. Away. The power of that choice hums in my veins. I shift, just a fraction, pressing my cheek into his palm. His breath catches. So soft I almost miss it. This is foolish, I murmur. Yes, he agrees, and yet his thumb strokes the hollow beneath my lower lip. And yet here we are. My gaze drops to his mouth. I tell myself it's academic interest studying the shape of the man who holds my fate. But the tilt of his lower lip, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the slight part in his lips as he breathes me in, none of it feels academic. He leans in a little, just enough that I can feel the heat of him, the faint brush of his breath against my skin. He could close the distance now, take what hangs between us. He doesn't. Olive, he says softly, warning and invitation all at once. If I kiss you, it will not make this bargain easier. I know. I breathe. Then why are you looking at me like that? Because something inside me is shattering. Because the girl who swore she'd never bend her neck is tipping forward, pulled by a gravity she doesn't understand. Because I want to prove to him, to myself, that my body can respond without my heart following. To prove I feel nothing. The lie forms before the action. I let go of his wrist only long enough to catch his shirt, fingers curling in the linen. I tug him toward me at the same moment I rise the smallest distance off my chair. I kiss him. For a heartbeat, he doesn't move. His mouth is warm and still beneath mine, as if he's giving me that choice time to retreat, to say it was an accident. Then he answers. His hand slides from my jaw to cradle the back of my head, careful and firm. His lips part, deepening the kiss with a control that makes my toes curl against the rug. Heat slams through me like a wave breaking, stealing my breath, blurring every line I thought I'd drawn. I'd meant it to be quick, clinical, a test. Instead, I'm the one chasing his mouth when he starts to pull back, fingers tightening in his shirt to keep him close. When we finally separate, both of us breathing too fast, the fire seems louder. My lips tingle, swollen with proof that feels uncomfortably like truth. Nothing, he asks, voice hoarse. Was that what you were trying to prove? I want to say yes. The word lodges behind my teeth, blocked by the echo of his taste on my tongue. Shut up, I whisper instead. He laughs then, a low, surprised sound that vibrates against my chest because at some point I ended up closer, knees almost touching his. His forehead tips briefly against mine. One more point of contact I shouldn't allow and don't stop. Olive, he says again, quieter. We still have a bargain. I'm painfully aware, I mutter. His hand slides down, fingers brushing the line of my neck, the slope of my shoulder. Each touch is deliberate, pausing just long enough for refusal that never comes. My body leans into each one like a plant seeking sun. Say it, I demand, needing something solid. Say what? The promise. His eyes darken, but his voice is steady. At dawn you choose. I exhale, some thread inside me unknotting. As his fingers trail along my collarbone, down my arm, every part of me is acutely aware that clothing can come off, that heat can rise, that this night can carry me places I've never gone. But that sentence wraps around my ribs like a different kind of restraint. At dawn, you choose. Not him, not my counsel, not the treaties, me. It's a dangerous freedom to hand someone you intend to seduce. Maybe that's why, as his hands map my skin and my own explore the hard lines of his shoulders, the fear in my chest twists into something fiercer. Because if I'm the one choosing, I can't blame anyone else for where this night leads. Heat lingers on my skin, long after our breathing evens out. The furs beneath us are tangled, half on the floor, half twisted around my legs. My heart has finally slowed from its frantic gallop, but every inch of me feels aware, too aware of the man stretched along my side. Jonathan's weight is a solid line of warmth against me, his arm heavy around my waist as if his body hasn't yet accepted that the battle is over. For now, the chamber is quieter than I've ever heard it, the roar of the fire softened to a steady crackle, the distant sounds of the fortress muted by thick stone. It feels like we've slipped into a pocket outside of time, a place where nothing exists beyond the radius of his arm and the faint ghost of his mouth on my skin. I stare at the ceiling at first, counting carved stones to avoid thinking about the way his chest rises and falls against my back. But my gaze keeps drifting to the scars I glimpsed when we moved, pale lines slashing across tan skin, disappearing beneath the edge of the sheet. I shouldn't touch him again. The bargain doesn't require curiosity. My hand moves anyway. Carefully, so carefully, I slide my fingers from where they rest against his forearm down to his ribs. The muscles there jump, then settle. I trace the edge of one jagged scar, its texture different from the smooth skin around it. He inhales, slow and deep. "Careful, little healer," he murmurs, voice rough with sleep and something heavier. "You keep touching my wounds. I might start thinking you want to keep them. You'd be easier to manage without them," I say, pretending my cheeks aren't burning. "Less intimidating, more average." "Average," he repeats, the word rich with amusement. His head tilts just enough that his breath brushes my temple. "Is that what you prefer?" "I prefer my patients alive," I say. "Scars mean they survived being stupid once. That was not stupidity." His tone shifts, the humor thinning. That one at least. My fingers still over the scar I'm tracing. It curves not like a blade from the front, but as if someone came at him from behind, low and fast. "What was it then?" I ask softly. His arm tightens around me, pulling me a fraction closer. "I don't fight it. Our bodies fit too easily now for me to pretend distance." "An omega," he says. Small, fragile looking, shaking so hard I almost didn't feel the blade go in. The air seems to thin. "Here? In another king's hall," he answers. "Before I took this fortress. Before I learned better." A humorless sound escapes him. "I was the visiting heir then. My father thought it would be good for me to see how other courts handled their packs. And they handled them by arming omegas? It doesn't match any story I've ever heard. They handled them by treating them like ornaments," he says. "The king paraded his prettiest at dinner to prove how wealthy, how generous he was. They knelt at his feet while he boasted about which lands he'd taken, which treaties he'd bent. I can picture it too easily. Jeweled collars, painted mouths, empty eyes. One of them poured my wine," Jonathan continues. "She wouldn't look at me, kept her eyes fixed on the floor. Her hands shook so badly some of it splashed my sleeve. And you thought it was fear, I guess." "I thought it was training," he corrects quietly. "He'd broken every other omega in that hall. Why should she be different?" Guilt pricks under my skin, sharp and misplaced. I wasn't there. But I've looked away before, told myself I couldn't fix everything. "What happened?" I ask. His hand splay against my stomach, fingers spreading as if to anchor himself. When the toasts began, she leaned in to refill my cup. I felt the point a breath before it slid between my ribs. His voice doesn't rise, doesn't dramatize. It's worse that he sounds almost calm. "Right here, where your fingers are now." I flinch, pulling my hand back before I can stop myself. He catches it, guiding it back to the ridge of scar tissue, pressing my palm there. "Don't look away, Olive," he says. "You wanted to know." I swallow. "What did she use?" "A blade small enough to hide in her sleeve," he says. "Tipped in something that burned like ice when it hit my blood. She hissed in my ear while I choked on it." "What did she say?" I whisper. "That she hoped I'd die faster than her sisters did." His breath fans hot over my shoulder. That her king had sent her to make sure of it. The candlelight blurs at the edges of my vision. "Did you kill her?" He doesn't make me finish. I tried to grab her wrist. She twisted, drove the blade in deeper herself. By the time the guards reached us, she was already gone. I close my eyes. An omega, small and shaking, spending whatever was left of her life to carve one wound into the man beside me. A king somewhere else using his weakest as weapons. "I'm sorry," I say, the words inadequate and still all I have. "I'm not the one you should pity," he replies. "She died believing she'd failed. I lived." Her king bragged about how devoted his omegas were, how they'd gladly bleed to defend his honor. His voice hardens on the mimicry. I saw the chains in their eyes after that. I swore I'd never be that kind of king. "You distrust easy submission because you've seen what it can hide," I murmur. "Yes." His thumb strokes absently along my hip, as if he doesn't realize he's doing it. Since then, a bowed head tells me less than a clenched fist. "They say you're cruel," I remind him, hearing Holofen's whispers. "Sometimes I am," he says without hesitation. "Cruelty keeps certain men in line. But I don't ask anyone to pretend to love me while they're sharpening knives." I turn slightly in the circle of his arm until I can see his face. He's watching me, jaw shadowed, eyes too open in the low light. I reach up before I can talk myself out of it, tracing the pale line that disappears into his hairline. What about this one? I ask. Another Omega? An alpha who thought he could take my crown in the training yard and make it look like an accident. A brief flash of teeth that doesn't reach his eyes. He was wrong. I follow the scar down to where it fades. He lets me. Patient as a man being examined by a healer he doesn't want to spook. Your turn, he says eventually. I've bared enough of my ugliness. Show me some of yours. I don't have battle scars, I protest. Just burns from ovens and nettle stings. I doubt that, he says. Words cut too. Deeper sometimes. His gaze sharpens. What did they call you, back in Hollowfen, when they thought you couldn't hear? The question lands like a stone dropped into still water. I look away, toward the fire, watching it devour another log. Too stubborn to place, I say finally. That was the council's phrase. The rest of them were less polite. Too stubborn to place, he repeats slowly, tasting each word. Like livestock that won't go into the right pen. That's exactly how they meant it. Bitterness steals into my mouth. Most Omegas in the villages get matched by 16. I was 19 with no offers. I talked back. I refused to pretend I didn't notice when men lied. I chose who I treated and who I refused to patch up unless they paid properly. The council called it uncooperative. I called it survival. And when the treaty came, he says, voice soft, they saw a chance to make you someone else's problem. My problem, I correct. Your escort didn't drag me here kicking and screaming. I walked, because they told you they couldn't protect Hollowfen without the treaty, he says. They made your body the price for their failure. I would have volunteered if they'd asked. I admit, throat tight. It still stung that they seemed so relieved to sign me away, like I was a too loud song they could finally silence. Jonathan's fingers tilt my chin back toward him. His eyes are steady, the weight of his attention a strange comfort. They were fools, he says. A pack that discards the wolf who guards its den deserves every storm that follows. I'm not a wolf, I protest automatically. His gaze drifts over my face, my mouth, returns to my eyes. Could have fooled me. We lie there, our bodies still tangled, my palm resting over his old wound, his hand curved around my jaw. In the beginning of this night, all I'd seen when I looked at him was the crown, the power, the threat. He'd probably seen nothing but the shape of my body and the leverage I represented. But now the picture has changed. Now I see a boy choking on poison and an Omega bleeding out on a foreign floor. He sees a woman bartered away by the people she mended and fed. We've both been betrayed by the hands that should have shielded us. The realization hums between us, low and dangerous. More dangerous than desire, because lust burns hot and fast and leaves ash. This quiet recognition, this shared, ugly history feels like tinder catching at the edges of something larger. His thumb sweeps once more along my cheek, slower than before. Olive, he says, and there's no command in my name this time, just acknowledgement. Whatever else this night is, understand this, you were never expendable to me. My chest aches, a deep, startling soreness, as if some shield I didn't know I'd been holding has cracked. You weren't expendable either, I say, surprising myself as much as him. Your father, that other king, they all forgot one thing. What's that? He asks, voice barely more than a breath. That weapons can think for themselves, I whisper. And sometimes they decide who they're really aimed at. His eyes close briefly, lashes dark against his skin. When they open again, something inside them has shifted. Less distance, more danger. Not of violence, of understanding. He leans in, and this time when his mouth finds mine, it isn't about proving anything or winning a bargain. It tastes like a truce, neither of us signed aloud, born from the shared knowledge of how it feels to be used and still choose to stand. Our bodies tangle again, but now there's another thread weaving between us, invisible and stubborn as my own nature. It's not love. Not yet. But it's no longer just heat, either. The night feels thicker now, like the air itself has weight. The fire has burned low, more embers than flame, but my skin still buzzes with heat. Jonathan stretched out beside me again, one arm under his head, the other resting over my waist as if his hand found that curve by instinct. Every time his thumb moves, just a slow, idle stroke across my hip, the bond inside me tightens another notch. I don't know when I started thinking of it as a bond. I hate that I do. Your heart's racing, he murmurs. Again. It's your fortress, I say. The draft. There's no draft, Olive. I refuse to look at him, staring instead at the faint patterns carved into the stone above us. Then maybe I'm just regretting my life choices. His low laugh curls through me, irritatingly fond. I can work with regret. Panic is harder. I'm not panicking, I say, and even I hear the lie. I just think better when you're not touching me. His hand stills, then slips away completely, leaving cool air against skin that had grown used to his warmth. The absence is instant and awful. My body sways toward him before I catch myself. Better? He asks. Yes. The word comes out too fast. He hums, unconvinced. Interesting. Your scent says you didn't like that at all. Stop smelling my scent, I snap. That, he says, would be like asking the moon not to pull the tide. I roll onto my side to glare at him, only to find him already watching me. Without armor and with his hair loose around his shoulders, he looks less like a king and more like some wild thing who wandered in from the forest. A wild thing currently stretched out on my furs, smug and infuriating. Your metaphors are ridiculous, I mutter. Maybe. His gaze drifts over my face, lingering at my mouth, then returns to my eyes. But you feel it, don't you? Feel what? I ask, though I know exactly what he means. The pull. His voice drops. I touch you, and it grows. I step away, and it snaps. Like a rope we can't see. I should deny it. Instead, my fingers curl in the furs. It's just chemistry, I say. Bodies reacting. That's what they do. His mouth quirks. I've had enough bodies in my bed to know this is not just anything. Jealousy pricks sharp and hot before I can smother it. I hate that too. He rolls onto his side, mirroring me, our faces close enough that I feel the warmth of his breath. Have you ever heard the old legend, he asks, about the echo-bound? The what? Omegas whose souls echo a king's power, he says. They were once called crown mates, fated to stand at his side, to balance him, to keep him from becoming a monster. That sounds like something kings invented to excuse bad behavior, I say. Maybe some did. His fingers find a loose strand of my hair, curling it slowly around them. But the first records come from before kings, when packs followed whoever could keep them alive. Stories, I say. Old ones. I've heard plenty. I don't build my life on them. I don't either, he says. But when I scented you at the border, when I saw you in the hall tonight, when I touched you, his eyes darken. It felt like someone had taken that story and slammed it into my ribs. Dramatic, I mutter, though my pulse jumps. He smiles slightly. You feel nothing when I touch you? I open my mouth to say yes. It's such an obvious lie that my body warns me against it, heat stirring low at just the memory of his hands. I clamp my teeth shut. That's what I thought, he says softly. I shove at his shoulder, needing space. Even if this ridiculous legend were true, it doesn't matter. I have a life, a village. You have a kingdom and a throne and more enemies than I have herbs. We are not two halves of a story. We're already in one, he replies. You just haven't decided the ending. He's too close. The words press on places inside me I've kept sealed. Panic scrapes up my throat, snagging on something that feels too much like hope. Stop, I say. I agreed to one night, not to be recast as some mythical echo-bound mate. His hand lifts from my hair. For a moment I think he'll retreat. Instead, he cups my face, thumb brushing along my cheek in a touch so gentle it disarms me more than any grab could. Olive, he says quietly, I don't need stories to keep you here. I need only one thing. What? My voice is barely a whisper. Your choice. At dawn. The words settle over my panic like a cloak. Familiar. Repeated. A promise I could almost lean on. Anger sparks under the relief. You keep saying that like it's a kindness. It is, he says. Kings usually take. I ask. There's a difference. Not for me, I snap. Either way, I walk out changed. His thumb strokes my lower lip, slow and maddening. You already are. I can't stand the understanding in his eyes, the certainty. It feels like he's seeing every fear I've tried to hide, and I have no armor left to block it. My body is still humming from him, traitorous thing that it is, remembering every place he's touched, every way he's coaxed it to shatter. Gods, you talk too much, I mutter, and then I lean in and kiss him just to stop the words. He meets me halfway, mouth opening under mine with a groan that slides straight through my defenses. This kiss is different. Less cautious, more desperate. I pour all the panic and confusion and want into it, praying it will drown out whatever feeling is clawing up behind. His hand angles my head, deepening the kiss, his other palm splaying warm over the small of my back to pull me flush to him. Heat flares everywhere we touch. My mind scrambles for distance even as my hips press closer, betraying me. When he rolls us, covering my body with his, the weight feels inevitable. Familiar now, dangerous. He breaks the kiss for air, forehead resting against mine, both of us breathing hard. Still nothing? He asks, voice raw. I hate you, I whisper, and even that doesn't sound convincing. He huffs a laugh, the sound shaking against my chest. No, little Omega, you hate that you don't. Before I can argue, his mouth is on my neck, finding the sensitive hollow just below my ear. My back arches, my fingers dig into his shoulders, clutching instead of pushing away. Every brush of his lips drags another soft sound out of me, sounds I don't recognize as mine. This is the pull, he murmurs against my skin. You feel it, don't you? Yes, I breathe, because lying would take more air than I have. His hand trails down, over my ribs, my waist, my thigh. Every touch a question I answer by moving into it. Panic and pleasure tangle until I can't tell one from the other. Each time he brings me over that sharp, bright edge, the world narrows to his voice, his hands, the way he says my name like a prayer and a challenge combined. After the third time, I'm boneless and shaky, my cheek pressed to his shoulder. My mind claws at coherence, trying to stack reasons like stones between us. I can leave. I will leave. This doesn't mean anything. My body hums a different truth. It means everything. He strokes my hair, slow and soothing. Tell me, he says quietly. Do you still think you'll walk away without looking back? Yes, I say, too quickly. His chest rises under my palm in a long, steady breath. Good. Hold on to that. You'll need something to fight yourself with when the sun comes. I want to ask him if he really would let me go. If dawn comes and I say, no, will he step aside? Or will the pull between us drag us both back like a tide we can't escape? Instead, I say nothing, and listen to the wild drum of my own heartbeat, counting it like a measure of distance. Every beat, another step away from the person I was when I walked into this room. Every beat, another step closer to a choice I'm no longer sure I'm strong enough to make. The knock comes when I'm half asleep against his chest. It's a soft sound, polite for this hour, but it cuts through the dim, hazy, quiet like a blade. Jonathan goes still beneath me, every muscle tightening in an instant. One heartbeat, he's warm and heavy and human. The next, there's a king coiled under my cheek. Stay, he murmurs, voice rough with sleep but suddenly edged. His arm slips from around my waist as he sits up, dragging the sheet with him to cover us both. Enter. The door opens just enough for torchlight to slice into the room. A young wolf steps inside, head bowed so low his braids brush his chest, shoulders tense with the effort not to stare. My king, he says, eyes fixed on the floor. Forgive the hour. Jonathan doesn't bark at him. That tells me more than any words. Speak. Scouts return from the eastern ridge. The messenger swallows. Alpha Ral is massing troops along the Hollowfen border. He claims it's routine drilling, but the numbers are high, and they're not keeping to his side of the river. The name hits like a cold splash. Ral. Our whispered curse for years. The Alpha whose men we patched up because turning them away would bring worse. Whose visits made mothers bar their doors at night. My hand fists in the sheet without thinking. Jonathan's jaw hardens. How many? At least 3 companies, maybe 4. They've set up signal fires. No banners yet. No banners means no official declaration. Just pressure. Just teeth at the edge of my home. Jonathan glances toward the shuttered windows, as if he can see through stone and darkness to where Hollowfen lies. When he looks back at the messenger, the softness from our bed is gone, replaced by something sharp and precise. Send word to Commander Vale, he says. 2 companies to the eastern forts now. Archers on the ridge line, healers stocked and ready. They're not to cross the river unless provoked, but they are to be visible. Make sure Ral's scouts can count every sword. Yes, my king. The messenger hesitates. And Hollowfen itself? Patrols doubled. No levy from the villagers. His tone goes colder. If Ral thinks I'll strip a border town of bodies so he can swoop in as their savior, he's more of a fool than I thought. The tightness in my chest eases a fraction. No levy. No forced conscription. For now. Jonathan catches my movement from the corner of his eye. I see the moment he registers that I'm listening, that I'm very awake. And send a raven to Rahl, he adds, gaze never leaving mine. Remind him that the treaty lines haven't moved. If his men put one toe beyond his rite of passage, he'll answer to me, not to some border captain he can bribe. The messenger bows so low his forehead nearly touches the stone. At once. When the door closes, the room feels different. The intimacy we'd wrapped ourselves in has shifted, thinned around the edges. The world outside these walls has shoved its way back in. I push myself up, clutching the sheet to my chest. He's going to Hollowfen, I say. Isn't he? Jonathan scrubs a hand over his face, then plants his feet on the floor, elbows on his knees. He's circling it, testing how far he can lean on my borders before I shove back. Because of me, I whisper. It's not a question. Because of power, he corrects. You're the excuse, not the reason. Rahl's wanted that route for years. Your council's desperation just gave him a story to tell his generals. I slide off the bed, ignoring my bare feet on cold stone. If I leave tomorrow, if I walk away like you keep saying I can, what happens to Hollowfen? His eyes track me as I pace, sheet dragging behind like a makeshift gown. Exactly what I promised. It stays under my protection. This isn't conditional. Olive. Rahl doesn't care about your promises, I snap. He cares about whether you bleed when he pokes you. And he's about to find out how sharp my teeth are, Jonathan says. With or without you. The room feels too small. My heart beats a frantic rhythm against my ribs, an echo of the drums I imagine thudding along the ridge near my village. Those people, I say. They didn't ask for any of this. They didn't ask to be a bargaining chip in a pissing contest between alphas. No one ever asks, he says quietly. I look at him then. Really look. The lines at the corners of his eyes are deeper, his shoulders heavier than they were in the firelight earlier. There's a map of scars on his body. But there are more I can't see etched in the way he carries himself, in the way he listens for threats even while lying naked in bed. How do you breathe? The question slips out before I can stop it. He blinks. What? With all of it. I gesture vaguely toward the door, the fortress, the world. Rahl, treaties, assassin omegas, starving villages who curse you and still depend on you. How do you lie down and sleep? His mouth twists. I don't. Not much. He pats the space beside him on the bed. This time, when I hesitate, it isn't modesty. It's the knowledge that every time I sit near him, something shifts inside me that will be harder to move later. Still, my legs carry me back. I sink down, the mattress dipping under our combined weight, sheet pooled around my knees. He takes my hand, not my waist, not my neck, my hand, and laces our fingers together, his thumb rubbing circles into my palm. You asked what happens if you leave, he says. Here's the truth. Rahl will watch you go. He'll test my borders harder, hoping I care less. I won't. I'll still send men. I'll still bleed for villages that curse my name. Why? The word is harsh. Why not let them pay for choosing the wrong king? Because they didn't choose, he says. Most of them never had a say. They were born where they were born. Like you. Like me. I don't punish peasants because their alphas are idiots. My laugh comes out brittle. You say that like you're not an alpha. Oh, I am. His eyes glint. I just remember what it felt like to have my fate decided by a man at a different table. We fall quiet. The fire settles. One log collapsing into a shower of sparks that briefly paints the room in gold. The politics around us won't stop, he says eventually. You stay, they move. You go, they move. The difference is what you get to do about it. What I get to do, I echo. He turns his head to face me fully. Yes. You are not a pampered captive I plan to drape in jewels and tuck away in a corner. You're a healer who knows hunger and fear from the inside. A woman whose first instinct when offered safety was to bargain for her village. That instinct just dragged me into your bed, I point out. It also kept Hollowfen from being conscripted tonight, he counters. Olive, if you stay, you don't become another silent Omega at court. You become queen alongside me. You get a voice in councils where men talk about your people like numbers on a ledger. Queen, I repeat, the word alien in my mouth, like a herb I've only ever seen dried, suddenly fresh and sharp. You'd put the too stubborn to place healer from a border village on your throne? I'd put the only person in this fortress who's told me to shut up to my face in years, he says dryly. The one who looks at my orders and immediately asks who bleeds for them. I can't quite breathe around the lump in my throat. And if I say no? I whisper. If dawn comes and I walk out that door with my decree, and without you? He squeezes my hand, once, hard. Then I still send troops to Holofen. I still face Rahl. I still wake up every day knowing I let my echo-bound go. The phrase makes my chest ache. Stop calling me that. Fine, he says softly. Then I let Olive of Holofen go. And I hope every treaty I sign afterward isn't weaker for it. Terror and something fiercer war inside me. I've spent my life furious at the people who made choices over my head. Now the choice sits in my palms, heavy as a crown. Outside these walls, an alpha tests the edges of my world. Inside them, another offers me a place beside him, not as property but as shield and sword. Neither path is safe. Both terrify me. Jonathan lifts our joined hands to his mouth, brushing his lips over my knuckles. It's a small, reverent gesture, more dangerous than any heated touch we've shared. At dawn, he says, voice low, you choose, but whatever you decide, know this. You are not powerless in this story, Olive. Not anymore. For the first time, the terror behind my defiance cracks enough for something else to shine through. Not hope, not yet, but the possibility of it. Midnight in the fortress feels different. The halls are quieter, the usual echo of boots replaced by a deep, watchful stillness. Jonathan's hand is warm around mine as he leads me, barefoot and wrapped in a simple robe, away from the main corridors and down a narrow stair I didn't know existed. The air cools with each turn, tasting of stone and something older, like the memory of smoke. You're smuggling me somewhere, I whisper, more to steady myself than because I expect an answer. I'm taking you to the only place in this keep where I don't lie to myself, he says. That's close enough to smuggling. The torch he carries throws restless light over his face, carving the angles sharper. Without crown or armor, he should look less like a king. Somehow, down here, he looks more like one. We reach a short landing, and another door plain, iron-banded, unguarded. He shifts the torch to his other hand and touches his fingers to a sequence of worn stones along the frame. I hear a soft click, then the door loosens. Secret doors, I murmur. Of course. He glances back. If you're going to be queen, you should know where they are. The word queen lands like a stone in my stomach, sending ripples through everything inside me. I don't answer. I'm not sure I can. He pushes the door open. The chamber beyond is circular and low, carved out of the bedrock itself. The air smells of ash, long, cold, and something faintly metallic, like old blood washed away but not forgotten. Candles ring the walls in iron sconces, their flames steady despite the draft that lifts the fine hairs on my arms. In the center of the room stands a cracked stone altar, waist-high and blackened across its surface, as if some fire once burned there so hot it fused soot into rock. Around it, cut into the floor itself, is a ring of runes. They snake together in an unbroken circle, edges smoothed by centuries of feet and knees and, perhaps, bodies. My heart starts pounding harder. What is this? I ask, though part of me already knows. The Shrine of Wolves, Jonathan says, voice softer, reverent. My mother brought me here once, told me this was where the first wolf kings swore their mate bonds under the old gods. Before churches, before councils, before paper treaties. I step closer, careful not to cross the carved line. Your mother believed in this? She believed in balance, he says. Said a king without a true mate becomes a weapon pointed at his own people. His gaze flicks to mine. I thought it was a story she told a scared boy so he'd sleep. And now? I ask. Now I've met you. Heat slides up my neck. We're back to that, are we? Yes, he says simply. We are. Because after tonight, I'm done circling it. He moves around the ring, setting the torch into a bracket on the wall. Shadows leap higher. My pulse follows. How does it work? I ask, nodding toward the runes, because talking is better than imagining. If the old tales are true, he says, when two who are meant stand together inside the circle, the altar remembers. The fire wakes, shows them what they could be. And if it doesn't? My voice comes out thin. Then it's just rock and soot, he says. And I am a fool who mistook lust and admiration for destiny. I swallow. You'd accept that? He turns fully to me, expression starkly open. I'd rather be a fool than a tyrant forcing a woman into a story she wants no part of. The sincerity in his voice scares me more than threats ever could. So, what happens, I ask, if we step in and nothing happens? Then I will never speak of fated mates again, he says. I'll give you your decree at dawn, and Holofen will remain under my protection. You'll walk away knowing this, whatever this is choice, not fate. And if something does happen, I whisper. He holds my gaze. Then I'll ask you to stay. As my partner, my queen. Not as property chained to my side, but as the only person in this realm with enough spine to tell me when I'm becoming the monster my enemies already believe I am. The room feels suddenly smaller, the air thinner. So either way, at dawn, I choose, I say. Yes, he answers. But this might help you know what you're choosing. My feet feel rooted to the stone just outside the ring. I look down at the runes, their edges darkened by time, and imagine stepping over them. Imagine nothing happening, just silence and disappointment, and the awkwardness of having believed, even for a breath. Worse is imagining the opposite. What if I don't like what it shows? I ask. Then we tell it to go to hell and make our own path. One corner of his mouth lifts. Or you walk away. The gods had their chance. I want to laugh. It comes out as a shaky exhale instead. He extends his hand across the carved line, palm up. The last time I took it, heat shot through me like lightning. Now the air between us hums before our skin even touches. Olive, he says calmly, as if we're back in the hall instead of standing on the edge of something ancient. You can turn around and go back to my chamber. We'll spend the rest of the night as we like, and in the morning I'll keep my word, whatever it costs me. Or you can step in with me and see if the old stories are more than smoke. I stare at his hand. At the scars. At the strength. At the trust. Fear claws at my throat. Not of him, not exactly. Of losing myself in something so much bigger than Holofen's little cottage. Bigger than my careful, controlled life. Of becoming half of a legendary we when I fought so hard to be a singular I. But there's another terror, quieter and sharper. Going back upstairs, lying in his bed, and always wondering what the altar would have done if I'd been brave enough to step forward. I hate you, I murmur. Good, he says. You'll need that too. My fingers move before my brain catches up, sliding into his palm. The contact is immediate and overwhelming, the familiar jolt racing up my arm. His hand closes around mine, steady as iron. On 3? He asks. We're not jumping off a cliff. His brows lift. Aren't we? I huff out a breath that might almost be a laugh if it weren't shaking. Fine. Don't count. Just move. Together, we cross the edge. The air inside the ring feels cooler, thinner, as if we've stepped into a different layer of the world. The runes press against my bare soles, grooves biting lightly into skin. We stop a few steps from the altar. Nothing happens. The silence stretches. The candles flicker. The crack in the stone seems to smirk at me. See? I start, relief and disappointment tangling. It's just, the altar flares. Not with flame at first, but with light. A sudden, blinding pulse that erupts from the blackened surface and surges up, wrapping us in white gold brilliance. I gasp, instinctively tightening my grip on Jonathan's hand. He squeezes back, grounding me. Images slam into me too fast, too vivid. I see myself on the fortress walls, wind tearing at my hair as I shout orders to archers. Jonathan stands beside me, our shoulders touching, our combined howl sending fear through enemies below. The scene shatters, reforms. I'm in a crowded hall, not as tribute but as host, crown braided into my hair, my hand resting on a map while advisors argue. Jonathan watches them, then glances at me. I shake my head, and he cuts through their noise with one word, the room falling silent. Another shift, a small garden inside the fortress, wildflowers clinging to stone. Children run between the beds, dark-haired, light-eyed, laughing. One boy falls and scrapes his knee. I'm there before the cry fully escapes, cupping his face, scolding gently. When I look up, Jonathan is watching us with a softness I've never seen on him in waking life. The visions keep coming. Battles, winters, arguments over strategy late into the night. I see us yelling at each other across a table, then quieting, then laughing, then leaning over maps with matching frowns. I see Holofen's fields greener, its houses mended, its people standing straighter when a royal banner rides through and the woman beside the king swings down from her horse to hug a child she knows by name. Through all of it, the constant is this. We are side by side, not one ahead and one behind, not one chained to the other's shadow. Beside, the light dims slowly, like a breath exhaled. When it fades entirely, I'm back in the stone chamber, knees threatening to give out. Jonathan's hand is the only thing keeping me upright. He looks as shaken as I feel. His eyes are wide, pupils blown, hair wild around his face. The altar still glows faintly, a dull ember where blinding fire just roared. Well, he says hoarsely. That answers that. My heart hammers so hard it hurts. It could be a trick, I rasp. Some old magic showing any pair who walk in some pretty future, so they'll bind themselves and feed it stories. Maybe, he says. Do you believe that? I think of the boy on the wall, the map under my hands, the feel of his presence at my side through every storm, of Hollowfen's safe, not because I hid, but because I stood where I could be seen. No, I whisper, I don't. He steps closer, our joined hands pressed between us now, both of us still standing in the ring of runes. Olive, he says, the name of vow. I can't promise the future will look exactly like what we saw, but I can promise this. If you stay, it will be as my partner, not my possession. You will have a say in every decision that touches your people. And if I ever forget that, you have my blessing to drag me back down here and remind me what the gods showed us. My laugh breaks on a sob. You're putting a lot of faith in a woman your council called too stubborn to place. Yes, he says simply. That's exactly why. The runes under our feet hum faintly, like a heartbeat echoing up from the stone. Or maybe that's just mine, pounding out the truth I've been trying to outrun all night. I met a king in a hall, and planned to endure him. Somewhere between his scars, my anger, and this cracked altar, I found a man I might choose instead. The flame is nothing like the hearth upstairs. The instant our joined hands cross the rune line, the dead coals on the altar erupt not red and orange, but silver blue, a cold fire that sears without heat. It behaves like liquid, pouring upward in a smooth column before billowing out, curling around us without burning. My breath locks in my chest. The hair on my arms rises. For a heartbeat, it's just light. Then, it becomes everything. Images slam into me one after another, too fast to brace for. I see myself on a battlement, wind whipping my hair into my eyes, the stone slick with rain. Jonathan stands to my right, armor battered, sword drawn, his shoulder pressed against mine. Below us, an enemy army snarls at the walls. Above us, the sky crackles with the same silver-blue fire. Our hands brush as we shout orders in unison, voices blending into something that makes the wolves below falter. The scene splinters, reforms. We're in a crowded hall. Not the one where I first saw him, but one I recognize anyway, the same stone, the same high windows, dressed differently for some celebration. Banners hang from the beams. People cluster around tables, talking, laughing. At the center, on a raised dais, Jonathan stands with his hand in mine. There's no chain between us. No collar on my throat. A circlet of silver glints in my hair. When a noble leans forward, asking him something with a smug half-smile, Jonathan doesn't answer until he glances at me. I squeeze his fingers once, speak a quiet word. He laughs, then gives the noble a response that wipes the smile clean away. Another crack. Another shift. Now the fortress is softer. A quiet garden tucked inside the inner walls, where wildflowers push through stone and a little fountain whispers over worn rock. Children race between the beds, shrieking with that particular glee that only comes when they believe they're safe. One girl has my coloring and his nose. Another boy has his dark braids and my eyes. A smaller child clings to my skirt, chubby fingers smudged with dirt from pulling herbs. I kneel to brush hair from their face, scolding gently as I check a scraped knee. When I look up, Jonathan is watching us from under a tree, arms folded, expression softened in a way I've never seen outside this vision. When the oldest boy shouts, "Papa!" and points at something over the wall, both our heads turn at once, same tension, same readiness. It should feel like someone else's fantasy. It doesn't. It feels terrifyingly like a memory waiting to happen. The images come faster. Winter councils where we argue about grain stores and patrol routes until our throats are raw. Nights when we stand over a map lit by candles, my fingers stained with ink as I circle villages that need aid. Moments when we fight, truly fight, voices sharp, eyes flashing, until one of us laughs first and the knot breaks. Arms around each other after bad news. His head in my lap when the weight is too much. My cheek pressed to his chest as he breathes through anger so he doesn't let it spill over onto the wrong people. Through it all, the constant isn't the crown or the battles or even the children. It's the way we stand, beside each other. Not one ahead, dragging the other. Not one behind, hidden. Side by side, shoulders touching, stubborn spines aligned. The realization slices through the visions like a blade. Whatever this magic is, it's not showing me gilded cages and obedient smiles. It's showing me the thing I've secretly wanted and never dared name. A place where I don't have to choose between being needed and being myself. That terrifies me more than fire ever could. The last image hits hardest. I see myself on that same inner wall where he first rode past my village older, lines at the corners of my eyes, hair braided back with a few silvery threads tangled among the gold. Jonathan stands at my side, his braids shot through with gray. Below, a new generation trains in the yard, wooden swords clacking. Somewhere behind us, a familiar child's laugh rings out. I turn to him, say something I can't quite hear. He laughs, leans his forehead against mine for a brief, fierce moment. The kind of touch you only share when you've weathered too many storms to count and are still, somehow, standing. The vision shatters. The silver-blue flame collapses into itself with a sound like a sharp inhale, then dies, leaving only the faint glow of candles and a line of after-images burning across my sight. The chamber rushes back stone, soot, the roughness of the rune-carved floor under my bare feet. I'm shaking. Not the delicate tremor of chill, but the full-body tremor that comes when something inside you has been pulled out and held up to the light. Jonathan's hand is still locked around mine. If anything, his grip has tightened. His skin feels hot, real, blessedly solid compared to the shifting visions. When I manage to drag my gaze up to his face, I find him watching me like he's braced for a blow. His eyes are wide, pupils dilated, expression stripped bare. Whatever he saw, it shook him too. Well, I croak, because my throat is dry as ash. That was dramatic. A broken laugh escapes him, half disbelieving. You saw it? Hard to miss, I say. Unless you regularly hallucinate entire lifetimes. His mouth curves, but his eyes stay serious. I saw us, he admits quietly. On the walls. In the council chamber. In the garden. With children, I add before I can stop myself. The word hangs there, vulnerable and huge. With children, he confirms, voice roughening. Ours, if the gods weren't playing tricks. I swallow. Do you think they are? He considers that for a long beat, then shakes his head. I've prayed enough to know when no one's listening. This, someone listened. The runes under our feet are humming faintly. Or maybe it's the blood in my ears. Each image flickers behind my eyes, overlaying themselves on what I know of him. The boy who stood over his dying parents. The king who refuses to levy my village, the man who asked permission before putting his hands on me. I could dismiss the visions as manipulation, convenient lies spun to bind me tighter. Except they didn't show me docile or quiet or chained. They showed me stubborn and arguing and still, inexplicably, loved. They showed me standing in front of Holofin with royal guards at my back instead of alone with a basket of herbs. They didn't show everything, I say, more to the altar than to him. No plagues. No betrayals, no nights we fail. Magic is selective. Magic is arrogant, he agrees. It likes its story neat. He shifts, bringing our joined hands up between us. But it did one thing right, which is, my voice is thin, it didn't make this decision for you. I blink, stunned by the simplicity of that. You think showing me all of that doesn't count as pressure? It's a mirror, he says. Not a chain. It showed what could be, not what must be. He takes a breath, steadying himself. Olive. The way he says my name lands somewhere low in my chest. If you stay, he continues, and we try to build what we just saw, it will be because you choose me, not because your council pushed you, not because some altar spat out pretty pictures, because you, with all your inconvenient stubbornness, decided I'm worth the risk. He falls silent. The only sounds are the soft drip of water somewhere in the stone and my own uneven breathing. Can you? He asks at last. The question almost gentle. Choose me? He doesn't kneel. He doesn't drop his eyes or clutch at my skirts. He stands in front of me inside a ring of ancient magic, wearing nothing but scars and sincerity, and hands me the sharpest weapon in the room. His vulnerability. The part of me that has survived by staying alone wants to run. To bolt back up the secret stairs, grab the decree at dawn, and pretend the last few hours were a fever dream. To tell myself that anything this strong must be a trap. But another part, the one that watched him send men to my village's defenses without hesitation, that saw him bleed memories in the dim firelight, that felt something like rightness in those visions, leans forward like a plant towards sun. I look at him, really look, and see not just the king or the man I just shared a bed and an altar with, but the future I could have beside him. The power, the responsibility, the danger, the possibility of being more than the girl Holofen signed away. Can I? I echo, buying time I don't truly have. I don't know. Not yet. His fingers twitch in mine. Honest, he says quietly. Good. But, I add, heart hammering so hard it hurts. For the first time, I want to. His breath catches, a rough, unguarded sound. The look that crosses his face is almost painful to witness hope and fear and something fiercer tangled together. That's all I can ask, he says. For now. The words settle between us like kindling waiting for a spark. Above us, the last glow of the altar fades, leaving only candlelight and the truth hanging heavy in the air. Dawn is still hours away. The choice hasn't changed, but I have. Dawn finds me awake. Pale light seeps through the high windows, turning the stone walls soft, and the fire a dull glow of embers. The fortress feels different at this hour, less like a beast and more like a giant caught between breaths. I stand at the window in my gray cloak, the same one I arrived in, fingers curled around the sill as if I could squeeze an answer from the cold stone. Beyond the walls, the world stretches out in shades of blue and silver. Somewhere past the dark smear of forest lies Holofen. My cottage, the crooked fence, the herb beds struggling against frost. Freedom, I remind myself. That's what waits out there. A life without a crown, without a king, without this impossible weight in my chest. But the ache the vision left behind is still there, stubborn as a bruise. Every time I blink, I see flashes of what the fire showed me. Children laughing in a stone garden, banners snapping over a wall where my voice carries as far as his, the two of us standing shoulder to shoulder when the world comes snarling. It would be easier if the altar had stayed silent. Behind me, I hear Jonathan stir. The rustle of furs, the soft exhale of a man waking into a moment he's been dreading. I don't turn yet. Coward, I think, and I'm not sure if I mean him or myself. Olive, he says. His voice is rough with sleep and something heavier. You're still here. Dawn hasn't finished breaking, I answer, eyes fixed on the paling horizon. Your bargain said until first light. I'm nothing if not precise. He huffs a quiet breath that might almost be a laugh. Trust you to argue phrasing even now. Footsteps cross the rug. I feel him before I see him, heat at my back. The awareness of his presence wrapping around me like another cloak. He doesn't touch me. That small mercy makes my throat tighten. I had this drawn up while you slept, he says. Paper brushes my arm as he holds something out. I force myself to turn. He's dressed simply dark shirt, trousers, hair braided back, crown nowhere in sight. In his hand is a folded parchment, thick and heavy, the wax seal at the bottom still gleaming red. My eyes catch on the words at the top, ink dark and decisive. By decree of Jonathan, Alpha King of the Iron Keep, protection for Holofen, he says quietly. Permanent. No more tributes. No levies without your council's consent. Any infringement by neighboring alphas is an act of war against me alone. My fingers tremble as I take it. The weight of the parchment is disproportionate to its size. Everything I bargained for is in my hands. Safety for my people. Proof he meant what he said. You're giving me this, I say, before I tell you my choice. Yes. His gaze doesn't waver. My word isn't a leash. I promised your village my protection if you endured the night. You did. I won't twist that into a chain to hold you. I could walk out now. Clutch this decree to my chest, wrap my cloak tighter, and leave. He wouldn't stop me. I believe that in my bones. I look down at the parchment again, then at his hand, empty now, hanging loose at his side. There's a faint ink smudge on his thumb, as if he'd signed this himself, not left it to a scribe. That detail unravels me more than any grand gesture could. The window shows me one future, Holofen and my cottage, the quiet satisfaction of tending wounds and coaxing stubborn plants from stingy soil. The altar showed me another. Walls and battlefields and council tables, a life spent not just surviving the storms but steering them. Both futures hold loss, both hold risk. There is no safe choice here, only honest ones. Slowly, I step away from the window. The parchment crinkles softly in my grip. Jonathan watches me, as if each movement is a verdict. I stop by the small table near the fire, the same one where he poured wine and asked about my village as if it mattered. My hands are still shaking when I lay the decree down, smoothing it flat between us. His jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. If you're leaving, you should keep that with you, he says. Some lords listen better when they see my seal. I'm not leaving, I say. The words are quiet, but they land like a dropped stone in still water. His eyes widen, shock flickering there before he catches it. For a king used to masking every reaction, that brief, unguarded flash feels like a gift. Olive, he says slowly, as if he needs to test the shape of my name against this new reality. You don't owe me. I know, I cut in. That's why I'm staying. Silence stretches. I can hear my own heartbeat. Too loud, too fast. I'm not staying as your consolation prize, I continue. The words finding their own spine. Not as the grateful Omega you bought with a treaty. Not as a pretty thing to stand behind you and smile when you give orders. I had no hand in shaping. A corner of his mouth lifts, though his eyes are too bright for it to be simple amusement. I would be disappointed if you tried. I am Olive of Holofen, I say. And the name feels different this time, bigger, somehow, instead of small. I am a healer. I know every path into my village, and which elders will argue with you just to see if you flinch. I know what it is to count every loaf and choose who eats and who waits. If I stay as that woman. I will not pretend to be something softer to make anyone more comfortable. Good, he says. The word is almost a breath. Because the woman from the visions didn't look soft. She looked like someone who would drag me by the ear back to the right path if I strayed. Don't tempt me, I mutter, but my lips twitch. His gaze drops briefly to the decree between us, then rises again. What do you want, Olive? In your own words. Not the altars. Not mine. The answer has been building all night, layered with every touch, every story, every decision. It still terrifies me to say it. I want both, I whisper. I want Holofen safe and seen. I want to keep healing, not just in one village but across all the ones like it. I want a say in how you wield that crown so it doesn't crush people like me. And my throat tightens. I force the last out anyway. And I want what we saw. The walls, the garden, the children, you. But only if I can have all of it without disappearing into your shadow. He takes a careful step closer, then another, giving me time to retreat. I don't. When you walk into my hall, he says, you will do it at my side, not behind me. When we sit council, there will be a chair for you, not a cushion on the floor. When we ride to Holofen or any other border, you'll be in armor if you wish, not packed off to some safe tower. Armor, I repeat, startled. Leather at least, he says, a flicker of humor cutting through the intensity. I'm not letting the woman I plan to spend my life arguing with bleed out because she refused proper protection. The phrase "plan to spend my life with" crackles between us like a fresh spark on old coals. Slowly, he lifts his hand, stopping just short of my cheek. May I? He asks. Yes, I say, and this time there's no tremor in it. His fingers brush my skin, warm and sure. He searches my face as if making absolutely certain. Olive of Holofen, he says, will you stay? As Queen of the Iron Keep, as my mate, as my partner, not because an altar told you to, because you choose it. My heart could pound its way out of my chest. Somewhere very far away, a raven probably takes flight. Troops shift on the border. The world keeps moving. I choose, I say. On one condition. His brows rise. Only one? For now, I allow. You don't get to decide who I am. You don't get to soften my edges to make me easier for your court to swallow. He smiles then, full and unguarded, and the sight steals my breath all over again. Agreed. I like your edges. He offers his other hand. I slide mine into it, feeling the fit, the familiar jolt, the quiet sense of rightness that still scares me and always might. Then, my queen, he murmurs. Shall we go ruin a few nobles' mourning? My laugh bursts out, bright and shocked. Gladly. We walk to the doors together. He doesn't pull me. I don't hang back. When they swing open and we step into the corridor, the guards straighten, eyes widening as they take in our joined hands, my cloak, the steel in my posture. By the time we reach the great hall, word has clearly outrun us. Conversations stutter, then fall to a hush. The nobles turn, some with open curiosity, some with thinly veiled disdain, some with the blank politeness of people already calculating what this means for them. I feel their gazes like arrows. Once, that would have made me want to shrink, to slip behind someone taller. Now I think of the visions, of walls and gardens and children who might one day need to see a woman stand here and not flinch. I square my shoulders. Jonathan's fingers tighten around mine, a silent question. Ready? I squeeze back. We cross the threshold together. No one announces me. No trumpets blare. But when we reach the center of the hall, Jonathan stops, lifts our joined hands, and lets the silence do the work of 100 heralds. This, he says, voice carrying easily to the farthest shadowed corners, is Olive of Holofen, the Omega you watched me claim last night, the woman who endured and chose, and now stands as your queen. There it is, said aloud, irrevocable. A dozen emotions flicker across the assembled faces: shock, outrage, grudging, respect, something like relief. For the first time, I don't look away from any of it. They see not a tribute sent to buy mercy, not a nameless Omega dragged from her village, but a woman who survived one night in the Alpha King's bed and still had the audacity to put terms on her own crown. My crown. I lift my chin, let them look, let them measure, let them understand. I am not here by accident. I am here because I chose to be, and somewhere, past forests and rivers, in a village that signed me away, dawn touches rooftops and fields that will not burn today. Thank you for staying with Olive and Jonathan through this night. Where are you watching their story from, and which moment of their journey so far has been your favorite?